In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 ways of setting a bleed in Create. So to start off, I created just some simple circles, some PNGs that are circles, just so I could show you each method using the same shape, and also show you the difference between if you don't have a border around your clip art and one where you do. So I also went through each one of these after I imported. I set the cut line to a bright green so it shows up so that it's easier to show you what's happening. So let's zoom in even closer here on the first one. And the first method again is called inset path. And the way this works is that it basically just shrinks the cut line. So I select the cut line only over on the layers panel. So I've got just the cut line selected, and I go to path, offset path, and then I set, just keep that at regular, and then the inset, make sure you have inset offset selected so that the cut line moves inward, not outward. And then for size, 0.01 inch should be enough. Now that's something your own experience can show, but if you have properly calibrated your solo and you have gone through the tweaking as needed to make sure that the cut line is just absolutely perfect on those test arrows, then you shouldn't need more than 0.01. Worst case, go to 0.015 or maybe 0.02, but you don't need to go further than that. Now then, here's what happens. So I click on OK. Watch that green line. That green line moves inward. All right, so now then you've got that extra little area, that bleed area outside the cut line. And because I have that cut line already set to, a thickness, let's come down and make it even smaller. So you get the idea of just how much extra bleed room you have around the shape. So if your clip art has a border like this one right here, then again, let's come up and let's select that border and go to path, offset path. Same thing, just put in whatever settings you particularly want to use. You shouldn't need very much. And then click on OK. And you can see that it moved inward. And again, I'll select this path and I'll take back down the stroke just so you get an idea of, oops, didn't mean to go that far down. Let's go down just to 0.1. So now then you can see that you have that black just around the outside of the cut line. So here's the typical kind of a shape that you might be wanting to do an inset cut on. And the reason I picked this one in particular is because of the fact that it doesn't have, a border around it. It's basically, just a clip art image with no outline. And so when you zoom in and you have a look a little bit closer at the cut line, and I'm going to do that just by hovering my mouse over. You can see the cut line, I moved it in 0.01 of an inch. And so it just basically goes around just on the inside of the shape all the way around. So this is an ideal case of, situation, but again, you can try anything. A case where this would not work well is, if you have small lettering. And the reason for that, as you will see, and this lettering is like 1/2 inch roughly high lettering, is that, let me zoom in on it a bit tighter. Okay. And now then, when I hover my mouse, and hopefully you can see that pink, you can see that it distorts the letters when I use the 0.01, and that's just because everything is so small. So in this particular case, I would not recommend using this particular method, and so now then we'll move on to the other 2 methods that one can use. So I call the second method stroke, color, and width. So what you're going to do in this particular example is you're going to take this cut line and you're going to give it both a wider stroke so that it'll expand outward and inward, and then also and then make sure the color is what you want it to be, because you're going to be printing this particular new cut line. So I select this cut line. And then I come over to the color and stroke panel, or the fill and stroke panel, and I change the color to whatever color I want to use. Now, depending on what your particular shape is, you might need to go grab, a color, to use, know what the hex color is, or the RGB for it. But in this case, I just happened to create this with the basic red. So I click on OK. And then for the stroke width, usually 1 is enough, but you can go ahead and make it just a little bit more if you want to. And then when I hover my mouse over it, and let's come back to this cut layer, and the color of the layer is set to red, so let's double click that. and then set that cut layer or that color to something that'll show up better when I hover over it. So make it green. Now then you can see that I've added that bleed just on the outside of that cut line. Now the only thing I have to remember is that this cut line by default, when you import a PNG, it's going to be set to print plus cut cut only, which means it's not going to do that extra red on the outside unless you change this from print plus cut cut only to just cut. Because when you have a layer assigned to cut, it's going to both print and cut that particular layer. So I'm going to change it to cut, and then basically I'm ready to go. So, and then the same thing, let's come over here and let's have it look at one that, let's say it has a black outline on it. Well, then I'd want to make that stroke black to match the outline color. So selecting that new cut layer, let's see, this is this one up here. There we go. And then again on the stroke and fill panel on the stroke color, I want to click on that and change it to black because that's what the color of the outline is, which is what a lot of the clip art, you know, if it has an outline, it's often black. And then for the width, I might make it 2. Again, you don't need to make it more than 2. And then click on, if again, presuming that you've gone through your calibration, make sure your calibration is perfect using the Delta XY screen. So, okay, so then after I do that, then let's come back over here to this panel, and then the hover line should be green, and there it is. This is where the cut line now is, and there's some black just on the other side of that cut line. And the last thing I need to remember to do, and you may need to write this in your notebook if you plan to use this, because you know it's so easy to forget these things, is that you no longer want this to be cut, print plus cut, cut only, because that means it's not going to print that extra black stroke on the outside, so you need to change it to cut so that it will. Okay. Now then, when would be a good time to use this? Well, let's have a look at that lettering example again. Let me zoom in on the lettering. And basically, regardless of whether the lettering has a already has a border on it or not, or let's say down here, you know, this one does, you can see that the lettering, the shape of the letters are now fine when I use that 0.01, and that's because the cut line hasn't moved, right? All you've done is just given it more color on the outside. And same thing for down here on this one here, you can see when I hover over it also that it looks good, that, you know, the cut line is going through the middle. Now this is an example where, you know, you watch your border because you may end up with more outline than you want or less or whatever. So just pay attention to the outline, the amount of outline you have for your lettering. Now, for a case in which this particular method will not work, it's easily as it does, you know, when you've got the border the same color all the way around. Is, for example, in this clip art, because the border color changes as it goes around. So you're going to have to either not use this method, or if you're going to use this method, you're going to have to pick an outline color that will work for the particular image. And so, you know, I could, let's come over here and I will grab the cut line, and for the stroke color, let's say, you know, let's say I'm picking black. Well, that looks fine. I mean, it's kind of up to you. You know, are you happy with that, adding the black? Now, you know, remember the cut line's going through the middle, so it won't be nearly as black as this, but that's up to you whether or not you can live with that. If you don't like that, then you got to go back to the inset cut. Otherwise, this is going to be the method you'll use for using a stroke color and width. Now finally, the last method is adding a shadow layer. So in this case, we're going to, again, I'm going to come in, I will pick the cut, just the cut line, and I'm going to add a shadow to it. So I go to Effects, Shadow Layer, and then you pick, you know, basically the size of the shadow. And again, I don't need that. I'm going to make just 0.02 will be plenty. And then you can pick the color that you want. Now, I can make it, you know, the same color, a different color. You also, when you're using the shadow layer, then layer, you can go back and give that a fill pattern or a gradient or something like that if you wanted to. So if you did have a pattern here that you have as a separate JPEG or PNG, then you can import that pattern and use it for your bleed. So anyway, so I set something like that, and then you click on OK. And then again, I'm going to come over, and in this case, it's a little different. So the cut line remains the same. The one thing that you do need to change is on the shadow. You've created a new shadow layer, and here it is down here, and I made it the exact same color as the shape, of course. And what I need to do for it, though, is that unless I change it on the style panel, I'm going to get a cut line around the outside of it as well, and I don't want that cut line. So on the style panel, I would change that from cut to print+cut print only. So you can see like the initial method, the inset cut was simple. There was like nothing you had to do in the style panel. On the stroke color and width, you need to make sure to set that, that your cut layer, you need to set it to cut so that it will both print and cut. And in this case, your shadow layer is something you don't want to cut. So you set it to print+cut print only. Okay, and then similarly over here on the one that has a border, again, I'm going to select the layer up here. I believe this is it right up here. Yes. Go to Effects, Shadow Layer, and then set it to what I want it to be. 0.02 should be enough. And set the color to black. Okay. And then click on OK. And then this original cut layer, I'll make it like a little less thick so you can just see that that's the cut line. But then on the shadow, the new shadow layer that got created, which is here, this black shadow, I need to change it on the style panel from cut to print+cut print only. The other thing is that because it's outside, if you're going to be making like a lot of copies or something, you might want to take the shadow layer and drag it up and into this folder so that now it's all part of this same folder. Now, when is this a good example? Well, again, with the lettering, let's come back over here and find the lettering. It works really well, again, because it maintains the same cut line. You're just expanding, you're just adding like a new layer on the outside of it, to provide the bleed. And so it works great for the lettering and will work, with most clip art. However, again, with the dragon here that we had before, what I did in this case was instead of trying to do the stroke and make it one, particular color like the black, I did something a little different. Let me zoom out here a little bit. What I did is I looked around the image and I found the buttons here that were dark gray. So I decided to make the shadow layer match that button, that dark gray. So that's just one idea. You could pick something else inside in another color that's in the image, or I could have made it black again, a black shadow, whatever. But that just kind of gives you an example of what you need to do. And as I mentioned earlier, you also have the option of filling, your shadow with a gradient or a pattern or something like that as well. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'm always happy to answer them.